It's the final episode of season 5 of Bungo Stray Dogs, and I don't know what to think. Hey, it's Romania Black, and yeah, I've got some comments I want to go over, but I don't know what to think. It's the final episode, and we know that there's not going to be another episode for quite some time, for a very long time, actually. And I'm not sure how to feel about it because I'll be honest, I have two things that I ask people not to do on my channel if they're going to comment without a spoiler tag. And my thing is, I like to read comments. It's something I like to do on my channel. I like interacting with people because I like talking about manga and anime with people, and so I read comments. And I've been fortunate to have mods for several of my shows. The mods I have now were not caught up with Bungo Stray Dogs, so a fellow patron who is super kind, Geen, or Jin, however you want to pronounce it, they asked if they could read comments. I was like, yes, that would be amazing. And they've done so good, and I've been so thankful for them and everything. And to make my mods' jobs easier, all you have to do is just write the word spoilers so that I can read it and know not to read your comment, or don't talk about the manga. Don't give me any information about the manga, especially when I've said how many times on here I'm going to react to the manga. And I don't want to be surprised or spoiled. And if it's anything that doesn't have to do with the episode itself, like if it's from episodes in the past where stuff's been confirmed or elaborated on, like fine, you can talk about that to confirm or clarify something that maybe I missed, but that was established in something I've already seen. But if it has to do with the future of the show, you need to spoiler tag that or don't comment about it, because that can ruin a reactor's experience, because I tend to overthink things a lot. It's just the way my brain works. And so if I know something ahead of time that's going to happen in a show, I hyper focus on it. Or if I know about stuff ahead of time, I can only think of that. And it takes away from the reaction. And you are all watching me to see my reaction and how I feel about it. So my point in all this is that Geen, bless them, someone had commented, and the comment itself didn't have any spoilers in it. Again, it was like, oh, that comment's fine. But what happened after they told me that was someone replied, and it was on Patreon. Someone replied, and the reply basically says that part of this episode is going to be anime only. That we're now officially caught up to the manga, and in this episode, it's going to go past the manga, and there's anime only content, which is my least favorite thing. And I was like, why wouldn't you spoiler tag that? You know I read these comments and the replies. And I'm like... So I'm very frustrated because, and I'm going to talk about comments here, but I'm very frustrated because now, hopefully, now I'm going to have to focus every ounce of my being to give you all a genuine reaction, but to focus on the episode and not think about it. But how can you not think about it once you know, right? So it's very frustrating, but it's going to take some of my enjoyment out of it. And not that I'm enjoying much, because this episode, last episode, ended with Dazai getting shot in the head, Atsushi getting his limbs ripped off, Aya not being able to save anything, and the world's ending. So maybe it's fitting. Maybe me being spoiled is fitting. But what I'm saying is, it's happened in another series before where someone revealed that it was caught up before I got to it, and I was like, please don't let this happen again. And it happened again. So I don't know what to do. But it's very frustrating. So case in point, please stop doing that. Stop spoiling me. Be considerate, damn it. Especially if you're paying me to watch shit, you know? Anyway, my rant's over, but I'm going to talk about these comments now. Sorry, I just had to be real with y'all. It was very frustrating these last few days. And apparently, people had been blackboxing in the Discord, doing what they were supposed to do, being kind and considerate, so that I wouldn't find out. And then, so thank you all for being nice and trying. Thank you. I appreciate it. But yeah, anyway, let's talk about these comments. So Dana talks about how Sigma sees text as numbers when he gets information from Fyodor because he's from a book. so he doesn't know a specific language to read, which I thought was really cool. Like, he doesn't have a specific language programmed in his brain, so he sees it all in, like, binary code. I thought that was really fun. It's also like when you check a library book out, it has, like, the barcode with it. I thought that was really cool. I liked that. And in season 3, in the 15 arc with Dazai and Chuuya, Dazai was shooting the dead soldier, and Chuuya stops him. But here, it's kind of like one of those reverse situations, and that just adds to the heartbreak, right? But yeah, so Sarah Linda talked about how Fukuzawa could have taken the page when he was near Fukuchi. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, Sarah Linda. That's a really good comment, because Fukuzawa was like right next to Fukuchi's chest. There's a possibility he could have taken the page and then collapsed. My thing is, if Fukuchi had the page where anybody that like bump bosoms with him could steal the page, he is damn awful at hiding it. It's like, why? I guess the one cool thing that could happen, and Sarah Linda talked about this, is what if like Rampo uses Poe and his book and grabs Fukuzawa and escapes from Fukuchi. They have the page of the book with them, and now Fukuchi can't get to the page, and it's been too long. The sword can't work anymore to help reverse time. That'd be amazing. Let that happen. Let it happen. I'm like, I'll get them out of there, get the page out of there, let it happen. I mean, Kunakita and Tanizaki will probably die at that point, but what can we do, right? Polygon said that, oh, never mind. They were talking about, never mind. Several commenters, this was not just limited to one, but several commenters were talking about how Fyodor apparently has anemia, and I was like, when did this happen? Did I miss this? Is this a manga-only thing? And I was getting frustrated, and then Dana was like, no, it's actually in season 3 when he was talking to Ace and said that he had anemia, and I was like, you know, can we believe Fyodor? I was like, at the time when Fyodor says anything, you question its validity, especially after him faking a split personality. Now I'm like, he's such an unreliable narrator. I'm like, does he have anemia? Can we trust him? It's just ridiculous, right? Barry pointed out that the life supporters were probably the same originally used for the hunting dogs when they had their monthly surgical checkups. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. That would tie in why Fukuchi would have access to those. So good on you, Barry. Way to notice that. The Martin talked about how Fuku is in their divorce era, which I love. And then Fyodor's in his homewrecker era. I'm like, God, yes. Just the worst at getting in between Chuuya and Dazai. And then they pointed out, is there a chance that Fukuchi and Mori could have met? We talked about in previous discussions that Fukuchi has been to the same area that Mori and Yasano were. Now, what's interesting is we haven't really seen Fukuchi around Mori or Yasano in this set of seasons 4 and 5, so if that's a possibility, we don't know, but that's a really good thing to point out, so I like that. And then finally, Dana talked about how it's interesting. They were like, I don't know what's worse, the fact that the manga's been spread out for years for this season 5, or the fact that you're experiencing all like boom, 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 boom. I don't know. I think that it would be traumatic either way, because when you experience it all at once, it's like a big train wreck and your brain doesn't have time to catch up, and your heart's just like sinking slower into your stomach, and you're like, well, this is terrifying, and it's just the worst experience. But then it's like, or do you want to drag it out where every chapter is a miserable experience for months? So I really think it's a lose-lose situation either way. I just imagine now that at Comic-Con when Asagiri was there, all the people, the Bungo Stray Dogs fans were like, are you going to give us any happy news? And Asagiri's like, I'm not telling. And everybody's like, no. I just picture that now. I really want to know if anybody asked Asagiri about the current state of the show and like, is there going to be happiness? And Asagiri's like, who knows? But then also, watching the Dark Era stage play, which I reacted to a while ago, there's a line at the very end that Oda says to Dazai, being like, it's up to you now. Like, you carry on my will. And it didn't dawn on me, damn it, until Dana pointed it out. But the moment Dazai looks over to Sigma and points at him, he says, it's up to you now. It's the same thing that Oda said to him. Oh my God. I was like, oh, like just, that was the best. That was the best little callback there. That's amazing. And then I'm like, Dazai is kind of becoming a little bit like Oda in that he's sticking up for the lost kids at Sushi and Sigma and Chuuya. And yeah, I'll stick Chuuya in there. But it's so sweet. It's like Dazai's not quite like Oda, and I don't think he can ever be, but it's just so sweet, except he's dead now. So what do we do with that? If I'm being honest, I'm very nervous because there's one thing I hate in anime, and it's filler. I don't like when stuff is not canon. I don't like when it's just filler, and I really don't like when anime only content is thrown in and it makes things worse, because usually it's like the studio pushing it and it's not backed by the author or the mangaka. So I'm very nervous at what is going to be anime only and what's going to be manga content. And the problem is, this series is so bonkers at this point. How are we going to tell the difference? So I guess the only silver lining out of this is going to be that next week when we do the manga reaction, we'll get to see for sure what was anime only and what was not. But that would have been a nice surprise, you know, if I hadn't been told about it earlier. But I'm not bitter. I didn't just nearly cry in my office about it today. No! I'm very thankful that you all have stuck with me with this series. I love Bungo Stray Dogs. I really do. And it's going to be sad knowing that we have to wait so long for the next season. Bones really is spoiling us. They knew what they were doing. They're like, we're going to give you seasons 4 and 5 back to back, but then you're going to have to wait a long time before season 6. And it's like, But I can wait. I have a lot of patience, usually. So we're not going to waste any more time. We are going to dive in and see what this season finale gives us. I'm a little bit nervous, y'all. I'm not going to lie. I'm just fingers crossed that Aya and Bram are safe. That's all I ask at this point. And maybe that Dazai's alive. And maybe that we have a happy ending. And maybe that... But we're going to start this here in 3, 2, 1. And come on, Bungo Stray Dogs Season 5. Man, Bungo Stray Dogs really got the number 6 treatment, didn't it? Oh, y'all. If you all enjoyed this episode, this may not be the discussion to watch, because I did not like this. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, oh, well, Romania, it's because you know that part of it was anime only and part of it's just the manga. And I'm like, no, that's the reason I don't like it. Because you can tell, or at least I think you can tell part of it that's anime only and part of it that's manga. Because you can, there's just parts of this episode that don't have an Asagiri flair to them. They're missing his like demented spirit. There's parts that I was just like, what the hell is happening? What are we doing? And then there were parts I was okay with. There's parts I was like, all right, this makes sense. I'm here for this. And there's parts that just came out of left field that I'm like, why are we doing this now? Why didn't this happen 12 episodes ago? You know? And then there's parts that make no sense. Sigma's freaking inside Mersault just dying in the floor. Dazai's like, well, I bonded with him, but don't need him now. It's like, what the fuck? Oh, you know. Oh my God. I was like, wait a minute. Okay, two things before I dive into my rant about this episode, because I did not like this episode at all. This is probably my least favorite season finale for Bungo Stray Dogs, because it felt like such a cop-out in some ways. Like, we suddenly had to make things magically work out. And I was like, no, you don't have to end the season. I mean, I was joking about being miserable and wanting to, like, get relief. I did want relief, but not like this. So, two things before we start this. One, the only caveat is that batshit bonkers ending that makes no sense, I'm glad about it, because for a second, I was getting worried that the ending they were giving us of, we'll talk about Fukuzawa cradling Fukuchi in his arms, like a damn BL series. We'll talk about that. But when they were having that ending, I was getting a very nervous vibe that this was going to be the end of Bungo Stray Dogs, and I was really going to be sad. I was going to be like, oh shit, this is going to be the ending of Bungo Stray Dogs, and this is it. And that's all she wrote, and what do we do, right? That's what I was afraid of. I was afraid that was going to be the end of the series, because there is a very bad thing that happens when sometimes the show runs out of manga content to adapt, and they switch over to anime content, the thing that happens is the show ends and they don't make it go any further, which is a problem. Like, it took Fruits Basket, I don't know how many years. Well, 2003 was the first series, and then it wasn't until 2019 it got redone. You have that. The second thing I was going to point out is I thought this episode reminded me a lot of the final episode of number 6. So, number 6 spoilers, if you fancy that series, or if you've not seen number 6. Number 6 is a classic case of the manga was not caught up to the anime adapting it, and so the anime wanted to end, and so rather than wait and adapt the extra manga content that came, it just gave it its own ending. And spoiler alert, it's not good. I think the only ending for a series, I think there's been 3 shows that I think have had bad endings. One of them is number 6. Now, when you go read the manga, it's a lot better. I'm like, oh, good. But number 6, I don't like the ending of that anime at all. The rest of it's great. End of number 6 spoilers. And then there's another show, and then this series, I was getting really nervous for a hot second that this was going to be the last season and that Bones was just not going to adapt. Because here's the thing, a lot of times animes don't retcon themselves. They don't go back and retcon. So if something happens in the anime and then the manga changes it later on, they don't go back and change things. I think, again, Seraph of the End is a great example of this. Seraph of the End, the anime ended before the manga did, so the manga has kept going, and the way that the anime ended is not like the manga. So my fear has always been, well, they're never going to bring back Seraph of the End because the animation studio doesn't want to retcon what they've already set in stone with the animation. And I was getting those vibes with this. I was getting really worried, and I was like, oh, is this the final episode of Bungo Stray Dogs? Should I feel sadder? Because I don't feel sad, I feel angry. And then they showed us that bullshit one at the end. I was like, wait, what's happening? And so it's fine. It's fine. We'll talk about whatever the hell I just watched there at the end. But the only satisfying thing is it looks like it's not the end of Bungo Stray Dogs. Hopefully not. Hopefully this isn't a Mario movie thing. Not the new Mario movie, like the 1993 version where they're like, we're gonna go get them, boys, and then we never see it again. I don't think that'll be the case, but I did not like this episode. Because it felt too easy. And there were so many unresolved plot points and so many things that we've built up that were never addressed again. And some things that I was like, wait, what? And so we're going to play a fun game now. We're going to play a fun game. This is called, was it the manga or was it the anime only? And so the fun thing about this game is that next week, I'll take a screenshot of this when I'm done. And next week, we're going to talk about, when I do the manga reaction, how many of these I got right and how many of it's wrong. So that'll be fun. That'll be a fun time. Yay. But yeah, I just want okay. So we might as well talk about some of the good. Might as well talk about some of the good that happens in this. I do want to call bullshit on some things, and so you all will have to humor me, but we have this whole thing. And again, they start out Bungo Stray Dogs with, they don't do an OP for this episode. They started out with a slate that looks like a mausoleum, so it looks very final, which I was getting a little worried about. I was like, oh, this seems like the finale for the whole series, not just a season, which I was like, oh God, I hope that's not the case. But they're like the final trajectory. So I have some problems with this, right? Where we have, okay, all these missiles get sent. The world is ending. The EU guy is worried. Octagawa finally does what he should have been doing 2 episodes ago, which is go to buy, turn that off, which is go to buy at sushi. And then Aya's like, well, why can't this work? And he's like, oh, well, it's just, you needed a little extra weight. You did nothing wrong. There was just nothing more you could have done. Okay, so here's bullshit factor number 1. And I don't know if it's bullshit or not. It's just kind of like, Aya weighs probably a total of 50 pounds. Let's be real. She probably weighs 50 pounds. And then we're going to put the manga, the anime only, and the fudge over here. All right. Aya being the extra weight, I'm going to put here. I can't decide if it's anime only or manga, but that girl weighs like 50 pounds sopping wet. Maybe 80 if we're lucky. Is that really all it took to make the sword come out? Was that it? Just that extra trajectory? I mean, I guess. But then, what is up with Bram's hyper regeneration? I was gonna say is probably his magical girl regeneration. No, like, that felt like such a Sailor Moon episode. Like, he just shows up and he's like Swan Princess himself, new body parts. I was like, wait a minute, he doesn't have regeneration powers that I knew of, like at Sushi. He's just immortal. That was kind of that was the neat thing about his character, was that he can't die. He just is a torso, right? And that's it. And that's the whole thing. Like, I guess once you took the sword out, whatever was blocking his regenerative powers suddenly worked again. I guess, but that was never explained. It was never on the table, because, like, why couldn't he regrow his arms but not his torso because of the sword? WTF. I'm like, that doesn't, I mean, symbolically, it's a really touching scene, and Aya sacrificing herself is really touching. And then Bram making himself her knight is super touching. I loved that scene, but it's just kind of bullshitty, and I'm like, well, wait, what happened? I thought maybe she would, like, you know, drag something else over there. I don't know. Was there I don't know what I was expecting, but it was like, okay, well, I'll take it, I guess. We can do that. She falls, seems, and Brahm's like, oh God, no. And then the sword gets chunked out, right? So this part here, where he's like, there's a slight opening in his sword, and I'll get him there. Yeah, we're going to talk about Fukuzawa's opening. That part was weird. Fukuzawa's opening. That part was really bizarre. I was like, wait a minute, what is going on here? That part where he's like, okay, I'm going to go up here and go after his sword, and he slaps him, and he's like, well, I saw your move coming. And that's when everything looks like it's going to hell. Like, Aya's going, okay, Akutagawa biting at Sushi. Aku biting at Sushi. WTF because he's still a vampire. We didn't turn back time using the sword, right? We didn't turn back time in that moment. He'd already, when Fukuzawa got stabbed with the sword and grabbed it and rammed it through him again, he's like, oh, I already saw that coming, and he'd already reversed time. So Akutagawa bit at Sushi. Why didn't Atsushi turn into a vampire? That's why I think that that's also a moment that's anime only. I'm like, I think Vampire Atsushi's anime only, because he should have been a vampire, because, well, then how did, that last sequence anime only, or was it previewed by Asagiri? I wouldn't be surprised if Asagiri told Bones, was like, hey, here's like some thoughts I have, here's a preview of things I'm drawing for the manga coming up. If you want to put this little tag on the end of the season saying here's what's to come, I'm cool with that, and then my manga will catch everybody up, and that'll let the anime keep going. And Bones were like, yes, sure thing. I'm fine with that. But, like, Akutagawa not becoming a vampire anymore, having this weird knight gear, did Bram turn him into his knight but took away his vampire powers? What is this, Bram McChrist? How do you do this? Savior of Akutagawa and the trench coat? How do you do that? What? I don't understand. We'll talk about that final scene and everything, but he has like Night Squire outfits on. I'm like, what? No, what? So, but yeah, Atsushi should have been a vampire. He got bit. We've established Chuuya was a fake vampire, which we'll talk about, but I'm like, no. So, I don't know, right? I don't know. But supposedly, now I do think Fukuzawa, like, taking the sword as his own, sure, and the dagger breaking and him grabbing and the stuff with the all units. That stuff with Fukuzawa, like, taking control of the headset. Fukuzawa and the headset. I could see that being anime only and him getting the sword. I could see that being a thing and turning the situation around, right? And the voice control thing is weird. Like, the voice activation. The voice activation does not seem like a manga thing, because how does that even work? How do you program the one order to have someone's voice as a voice command when that person's never spoke to them? Did Fukuchi record Fukuzawa saying something and then took that recording to the one order and programmed the one order to accept the voice command of Fukuzawa so that he could control the one order? But how could he do that if he didn't get the one order until the EU dropped the one order over there? How does that work? He didn't have access to it to do the voice command before, so that sounds like a bunch of bullshit. That doesn't make sense. That voice activation bullshit doesn't make sense. No, just say that whoever gets the device can command it. You don't have to say that you programmed it for only one person, because when did you have time to do that? And if you had time to do that, then why did we do all this bullshit to start? You could have just taken it like 3 months ago, or whenever you programmed it. Anyway, we get out of that and we go over to Fyodor. Now, do I think Fyodor meeting Nikolai is in the manga? Sure. Fyodor and Nikolai's scene with the antidote. The thing that I don't get is, why didn't he just shoot himself with the antidote right now? Why didn't he inject the antidote right now? What was the deal with that? Why was that? And also, the whole thing with the poison, it has been well beyond 30 minutes. It has been beyond 30 minutes. He should be dead by now. So I kept thinking that they were going to say, oh, well, 30 minutes have passed. I kept waiting for Fyodor to say, oh, I didn't actually inject myself. That wasn't a real thing. I did whatever sleight of hand he was going to reveal. I kept thinking that was going to happen, and Nikolai was going to be like, oh, you don't need it? And he's like, I don't need it. And it was going to be its own thing. But why he didn't take the antidote makes no sense at this point. Unless he doesn't trust Nikolai and thinks it's not even the antidote to begin with. It's like, salt water or something dangerous. But yeah, the one saving grace of this scene is that Nikolai is being like, my best friend, everyone's so awesome, yay! Like, the voice actor for Nikolai is fun. I love him. And he does, like, this really cute dialogue and banter with him for a second. But you can always kind of tell, though, when the dialogue of a series is getting into that anime-only realm, because usually the sentences are very short and choppy. They don't quite sound in character, and they're very generic, so that it's like anybody writing can make them fit the character. And it sounds a little bit like that here, so I could be wrong about that. We'll just save it. At this point, I don't know what is manga. It doesn't seem like a lot at all. So yeah. And he's like, oh, you mean this? Hell, the only manga thing in this episode might have just been her jumping on the sword and being the extra weight. I'm gonna say that that's manga. That could have been the only manga in this episode. I would believe it. A lot of it doesn't feel like Asagiri. It doesn't feel smart enough for Asagiri, right? And like, he's like, but first I want to know how you got out. How did you communicate? And he's like, oh, it's simple. I used the vampire guards. That doesn't make sense. So the vampire guards, no. The vampire guards as communication, I don't like that. That seems really generic. Like, Dazai was using his damn heartbeat as Morse code. You just had like an undercover vampire cop. That doesn't sound like Asagiri. That seems kind of eh. And so he's like, I'll take it in the helicopter. And then he says, oh, I can't fly it. So he says, Dazai was my greatest foe since that man. I assume that man is referring to Fukuchi, but it could be referring to somebody else that we don't know yet. Could be that. Could be that. Now, we talked last episode about Dazai actually not getting shot in the head with a gun, that Chuuya used gravity manipulation to stop the bullet. We did talk about that in the discussion. So that part, I was like, okay, that's how he didn't end up dying. He still has his arm and stuff, like, shot, and at least his leg was in a brace. But I'm like, okay, that part makes sense, right? That part makes sense. But the part where he gets in the helicopter and starts to go off, and that's manga only, or anime only. Sigma Left Behind. That has to be anime only. That part pissed me off the most in this entire episode. We have spent the entire series, the entire second part of the series with seasons 4 and 5, building up Sigma, building up his character, building up that relationship with Dazai, and he gains all this information for Fyodor, passes out, and Dazai and Chuuya just leave him? What? That's ridiculous. No, I was like, is anybody gonna go back and get him? Are we gonna touch base on him? Oh, we're not? Really? What? So yeah, I was like, wait, what? But you, how? What? And he says he'll never awaken again. I'm like, so are you just killing Sigma like that? No, that doesn't seem right. We can't just kill Sigma off without anything happening. What? So loose ends, we're gonna put this up here. So loose ends in all this madness. We have Sigma's status. We have the division, the Special Ops Division president status. We don't get that. The damn clock tower never showed up. Where the hell they been? We got that to worry about. We have Yosano and the other ADA. Don't know where they're at. Mori and Elise. We didn't see Mori and Elise all damn season. Who knows where they are? What about the Black Lizard? What are they doing? Are they still vampires? How's that going? What's going on there? We never found out about Natsumi. Where the hell Natsumi been? We don't know about him. All this stuff here happening. Juno, where's Jono? What about him? You show Taruko and you show Techo and Kenji at the end, but you don't show Jono? What about his character? Where'd he go? What about the guild? What about them? You forgot half the cast. But we've had Sushi running up to Fukuzawa at the end, but we forget the other half of the cast. It's fine. It's fine. Ongo! What about Ongo? Oh my god. I was like, wait a minute, what about all these characters? And so, and Nikolai, I did like Nikolai and Fyodor being like, well, I'm going to kill you now because you tried to hurt me. And Nikolai being like, oh, we're going to play a game. Now I'm going to have to run away from you and you're going to chase after me. I liked that. I thought that interaction between him and Nikolai was really good. And I was like, okay, we're going to start something with them. Okay. And I thought Nikolai was going to get away and go from there. But instead, he gets impaled by a vampire and then Dazai shows up. And then we have the whole thing of Aya and Octagawa saves her. And Bram is magically, not only has Bram, this is how you know it's anime only. Not only has Bram mysteriously regained his arms and legs, but his clothing grew. What? I mean, when Atsushi's arms and legs regenerate, his shoes don't regenerate. You needed to have, it would have been hilarious if you were going to do a scene, and this is why I know it's anime only, because Asagiri, if they had let Bram regenerate himself, he would have been nude, and Aya would have been like, ew, no, and he would have been like, what is wrong, little girl? Like, there's nothing here you should worry about. You can't think of such things now. She's like, it's a different time, you know? He would have been naked. And I'm not just saying that because I want to see Suda's character naked, but you can't regenerate shoes. And why studios don't think of this, I don't know, but you just had you had Atsushi regenerate his, feet and legs, but he didn't regenerate the clothes that came with them. So no. And he's like, I am Lord and Count. That seems like an anime only line. And his boots with the fur! You can't regenerate boots with the fur! Anime only boots with the fur, Can't do it. No. And it just seemed like everything happened all at once. The missiles suddenly being disabled and descending into the ocean reminded me a lot of the Digimon movie from like 2001, where it's like, have you ever been close to tragedy? And then the missiles just fall into the ocean and disabled. The Mighty Boosh plays, and TK and all of them are all saved, and Agumon's like, we did it, Tai! Like, it's just, that part was fine. Disabling the missiles, glad to see it. Glad we didn't have a nuclear World War III. That's great. But it just feels like even Rampo isn't like his normal, like, Rampo isn't himself. Rampo has nothing to say, so you know that that's anime only, because he doesn't have any, like, quippy whips or any quips or anything to say. He just, like, holds Atsushi's nose and wakes him up. However that works. And then he's like, I don't have control over all things like you. My hand was full of uncertain cards, but you had one weakness. You can't trust anything you can't manipulate. Now, I did like the idea of the talk of allies. I think that does align with Dazai's philosophy being like, of Fyodor wanting to micromanage the situation and have all of his avenues, you know, I's dotted, T's crossed. And Dazai's like, you also don't trust anyone, so you weren't banking on allies, right? Which is fine. Oh, also Hawthorne is still in Lucy's place, but whatever. But I did like the idea of Dazai being like, I have allies, and he's like, I didn't know how the things would unfold, but I trusted Rampo, I trusted Atsushi and all of them to make sure it would happen, and I trusted in my allies, and it paid off. I just didn't know how it was going to occur. And so Rampo negotiated with, you know, with Bram to hand over the helicopter. I'm like, but Rampo was like near death a second ago, so when did he heal? When did that happen? He was like near death 5 seconds ago. What? That seems anime only. We're going to put that on here. Bram and Rampo seem anime only. And maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I'm very curious to see if the manga is going to follow this and just expand upon it. We'll talk about that when we get to Fukuzawa and Fukuchi's moments. If it's just going to expand upon it and make it make more sense, and the manga and the anime is just going to streamline it into this episode, and Asagiri is going to spend some more time in the manga with it before getting to where the epilogue of this episode was at, that'd be great. And he's like, oh, you were shot in the head. And he's like, oh, this. Yeah, that hurt. The dumbass was supposed to go easy. And he says, who are you calling dumbass? And Fyodor's like, excuse me. And so this is the part that I'm like, wait, the whole thing about Chuuya being a vampire and not being a vampire. They animated him with the little lines around his eyes, and like the eyes were sucked in, and I don't like Chuuya faking being a vampire for a number of reasons. One, it takes away the stakes of every scene with them in it. If you know now that the drowning scene, Chuuya was faking being a vampire and faking drowning and was going to get out the entire time. If you know that, then that makes Dazai's little speech mean nothing. His little bye means he knew that Chuuya was going to be fine. It takes away any like wonder or worry for his character, and it doesn't make you feel as sentimental about the moment because you're like, oh, it was just an act. They knew that they were fine. And then the whole thing with Dazai getting shot in the head and shot in the arm and stuff, it's like but Dazai's still only human, so him getting shot in the shoulder and stuff, he should still like be bloody as hell. Chuuya ain't got healing powers, so how? It takes away from that scene too, because that moment of Dazai, like, you know, joking and questioning Chuuya's trust and friendship, it makes that kind of moot too. So any stake or emotional value you had in those scenes with them, now you know that he was just faking it and they were just playing on an act for Fyodor. It takes away from the whole thing, and I'm not happy about it. So I'm gonna say fake vampire Chuuya. Now, maybe Chuuya will turn out to be, but he had the lines and everything under his eyes, and he was like, it just, I don't know. We'll find out in the manga next week, but yeah, and Fyodor's like, well, son of a bitch. And so then Fukuzawa goes to like strike him and kill him and strike him with the sword, right? And now, what I wanted to happen was for him to strike Fukuchi down here, like at the last second. I like the idea that Fukuzawa was hesitant for a hot second and realized that he didn't want to kill him right as he was killing him. That's fine. And then what I would have rather happened is the whole spiel that Fukuzawa gives him about war. I would have rather us We could have made this series 12 episodes this season. We could have done that. We could have done it in 12 episodes. We could have expanded more on where everybody's at in a 12th episode. And we could have gone back and did the flashbacks with Fukuzawa and Fukuchi and shown, like, maybe Fukuzawa finds a letter that he wrote to him in case if he died, or while he was pondering on what he was going to do. Maybe we could have done that. That all seems like it would have been a better choice than what they did. But him cutting him down, it's fine. Makes sense. But then he opens, but then it's like, how did he have this novel? Where did he get this novel from? Why did he have Ron Poe's novel in his hand? Or Poe? Poe's novel. When did he get that? When did he have that in his possession? I guess he got it from Ron Poe, but we didn't see that, so why? And he gets in Poe's novel, and then Chuuya. It is cute when Chuuya tries to take out the fake teeth, and he's like, it was all an act. I was just trying to get out of the elevator, and Chuuya helped me escape. That part makes sense. And he, like, the bullet stopped at my skull. That part makes sense. He's like, we used to do this all the time. But here's the thing. The helicopter scene, Fjordor's death has to be anime only, because the whole point was to figure out his ability. We don't figure out his ability if you launch him into a castle and he burns to death. What? You can't know his ability if that happens. Then what was the point? The whole time they could have killed Fjordor over and over again back in Mersault, but they wanted to find out his ability. That's why Sigma didn't immediately kill him, because he wanted to find out his ability. If you don't go back and get him, then how do you know? This show is usually really smart, and it makes you think. And this final episode, things did not make sense, and I was like, what is happening? And so he, like, gets him and has the pilot take off. I really thought that, like, Nikolai would save him. I thought Nikolai would save Fjordor just to, like, have him live to fight another day. And maybe he does before he burns up. I don't know. Maybe he does. But I thought that was going to be the case. I don't know why it wouldn't be. And then Nikolai just run away. Because what does he say there? Like, as it's burning out, he says, Eli, Eli, Lama. I want to find out what this says. Eli, Eli, Lama. It's a verse. It's Matthew 27:46. My God, why have you forsaken me? I mean, if that's his final words, fine, but we didn't find out his ability. We didn't find out his plans. Supposedly Sigma knows them, but we don't think Sigma is going to be... He's incapacitated, so what do we do with that? Fjordor's death just seems like really anticlimactic, and it doesn't seem to fit at all. I'm like, what? How? What? No. That was, So then we have Poe's novel space. And look, I wouldn't be opposed to the novel space. I liked the idea of transporting Fukuzawa and Fukuchi to the novel space and getting them to talk in this moment. I really liked that. I thought when we got here that Fukuchi was going to die here. I thought Fukuchi was going to explain everything to Fukuzawa and then die. And then Fukuzawa was going to leave the portal. But I guess Poe doesn't want a dead corpse in his novel. I don't blame him. But he talks about this amendment, right? He talks about this amendment. And he says that he'd heard this prophecy that all these people were going to die and everything was going to happen 36 years from now. And so he was going to have to go back in the past, and he realized the only way to save the world would be completely to fuck everything over and then make himself the savior that, like, held the one order and everything was going to be fine. And then he reveals he wants Fukuzawa to be the one to do the one order. And I'm like, one, you know Fukuzawa's character is not going to go for that. Why would you gaslight your best friend into that position he doesn't want to be in? And two, the ends don't justify the means. I'm like, what? It just wasn't... It wasn't good writing up to the Bungo Stray Dogs standards to justify. If you were going to justify Fukuchi, we needed more. It needed a little more setup, and it needed more teeth to it than just, I wanted to prevent World War III, so I decided to screw everything up, and then I was going to leave it to you. what? Because yeah, he's like, oh, we'll just have one nation and there'll be one person in charge of everything. And Fukuzawa was like, that's called a dictatorship and it doesn't work. And he's like, then all my plans were for nothing? I don't know what to, and it's all like rushed, everything shoved in your face at the last minute that I was like, why? It's like we have to hurry up and wrap up the episode and wrap up Fukuchi's story. And I was like, he's like a prophecy of a world war 36 years. I'm like, and I liked the idea that I liked the goals that Fukuchi and Fukuzawa set. That Fukuchi wanted world peace and Fukuzawa wanted to save the people that he liked. I thought that was a good tie into their characters, and that made sense. But then my thing is, it's like the ultimate irony. I'm like, you wanted world peace, Fukuchi, but you ended up becoming part of a never-ending war and killing people, and you were killing people for years to rise up the ranks. But how is that world peace? And Fukuzawa, like, and then he was talking about how I was like, we set Fukuchi up to be the most prominent world leader in the entire history of the world. I'm like, if you were so popular and you were politically able to sway the masses, why didn't you just convince them to get you the world order and you stop the seeming prophetic war from happening and the amendment from happening, and then just give them back the world order and been like, I saved you guys from a horrible prophecy that would have ended the world. And everybody would be like, oh my God, our savior. Why'd you have to go through all these links? If you were so popular and everyone loved you in the political realm, you could have probably easily, the guy, that's the other thing that makes me so mad. He talks about how he had to do all of these things to get the world order. But the guy at the EU said that he like worshipped Fukuchi and was like, you were my idol. I believed in you, thought you were everything. If the guy holding the world order said you were someone he idolized since like he was younger, why didn't you just pander to him, confide in him, be like, hey, this major thing's about to happen, but I trust you. Let me use the world order this one time and then stop the war from happening and I'll give it back and we'll have saved the universe. Why'd you have to go to all these links and kill people and get vampires involved and like make your best friend murder you or try to do something you could have done without this? What? I was like, wait a minute, what? Bullshit. I'm going to call bullshit. And then, okay, Fyodor's arm. Randomly, Fyodor's arm, Dazai is just like, he's just slinging it around. He's just got Fyodor's arm and he's like, look, he's dead. And my thing was like Nikolai's reaction. Nikolai's like, yeah, he's dead. I'm like, you're freaking yandere. You would have a much bigger reaction to him being dead than just being like, oh, okay. Like, he doesn't offer any like prophetic, poetic things about freedom. He's just like, yep, he did. And I'm like, what? And then Dazai's just slinging around the arm and like, here you go, here's a souvenir. And he's like, I will, like the lock of Harry Styles' hair I own, put it under a glass case forever and ever and lick it twice a month. Like, you know what? Yeah, and he just, you can't make this shit up, him cradling his arm. Okay, I will admit though, Nikolai cradling the disembodied arm of Fyodor is possibly the best thing that's happened in this episode. That and Sir Bram, the Count, who's like adhering to his goddess. I'm all for it. But yeah, when he's just like, we come back to Fukuchi and Fukuzawa, I kind of lost it when Fukuzawa was like, what is it, Fukuchi? Don't know. And he's like, do you know why we have war? And I'm like, are we doing this bullshit now? Are we having this conversation now? Why didn't you have this conversation 30 years ago? Why didn't you have this conversation before you put them all through all this bullshit, Fukuchi? What? That just read anime only. I don't know. I was just like, why? Could not. And then he talks about everyone becoming a state of we, and then the them and us will fade away. Great sentiment. It's great. That's Attack on Titan's trying to get there right now. I get that. We do need to get to that state. But it's just freaking hilarious coming from the man that slaughtered all these people. And he's like, it was just 500 people. We had to kill 500 people to save the world. I'm like, I get the message they're trying to say, and the message of us not being a state of they against us, but just we are we, and then it's great. And he's like, I just wanted to create the one order to do that. And here's the thing, the message itself, the storyline of Fukuchi wanting to do good, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I would be fine if this was Fukuchi's narrative. If Fukuchi's whole thing was trying to prevent this prophetic thing happening that would destroy the world, and that he was like, what if there weren't states? What if everything was open access? We were all borders and everyone was together. And if that intention of doing that good warped into something twisted and maniacal, like him controlling the one order and leading the world and being a dictator, I would be fine with that. I would. That would be a character development that would make sense. I'm like, okay. But it would need to be framed like a warped perception. If it was framed to Fukuzawa like, oh, this is my friend, he had all these good intentions, but he lost his way, and now he's warped into this person that isn't who he once was, that would match the Fukuchi we've seen all season. But now it's almost like we're supposed to feel sorry for Fukuchi and be like, wow, he really had a great idea. And not feel bad for all the bullshit he's done this whole season and last season. I can't do that. I can't just be like, oh, I'm suddenly going to be over everything you did because you had a good intention, man. It's a shame you tried to kill us all. What were we thinking? We should have just talked this out before it started. I'm like, why couldn't you have had this conversation with Fukuzawa before? Which is why I think it's like anime only, but I don't know. I mean, I like all the scenes of them together. I think they're all great. It's just... And then he brings up the idea of, oh, well, your detective agency carries guns, do you not? I'm like, so does the hunting dog, so does everything else. And it's like so weird that Fukuchi is framed as the pacifist here that's like anti-weapons. And I'm not a weapon person either. I'm very anti-gun myself. But I'm like, but Fukuzawa makes a good point. He's like, but in our line of business, there's always going to be conflict between people. If you control all the masses, you've taken away their freedoms. That's not living anymore. That's just them. That's just you controlling everything. And no one person should have all that power. But Fukuchi doesn't see it that way. And it's like, yeah, I'm just like, for Fukuchi to try to gaslight Fukuzawa about the ADA having guns, I'm like, can we stop for a second? I'm done with you. Boot him out. Get him out of here. And he's like, if everyone was under the umbrella of the Army of Mankind, there'd be no war. And I like that Fukuzawa's like, but that's a dictatorship, and then no one will have freedoms. So having no war will make no sense and it won't change things because everybody will be miserable. And it's like, yep. I also like that Saitama makes an appearance as the leader of the Army of Mankind. And I mean, I get it. I like Fukuchi's character as being this corrupted figure that wanted to stop war, but they got corrupted along the way. It's just that at the end here, it almost frames like he was right the whole time. And I'm like, well, your ideals are right, but the way you went about them is not at all. So, what? And then he takes the sword and asks, and here's my thing. He takes he takes the time sword. Fukuchi has the time sword again in his possession. He could go back in time and change this bullshit, but he doesn't. And then he gives it to Fukuzawa and says, my intention all along was, I stabbed you an episode ago. I stabbed you and seemingly mortally wounded you, but my plan all along was to have you take over and be the leader of the Army of Mankind. No, that's not how this works. There's no way that makes sense. Why would you have wounded him? What? I want to see the manga very soon so I can read it and feel maybe better about myself, knowing what is anime only, and maybe I'll keep faith in Asagiri. And then when he said the proposal was Fjordor's, I was like, that does not sound like a Fjordor proposal at all. And he's like, oh, I put him in jail so he wouldn't harm us. I'm like, I don't think Fjordor would have been comfortable with you putting him in jail to get rid of him. So, but, and then they leave the novel, and he's like, oh, well then I need you to behead me. And I'm glad that Fukuzawa was like, oh, I'm not going to behead him because that would go against every fiber of my character. Sure. And I'm glad they didn't make him kill him. But then, like, Taruko coming in was weird. Like, her stabbing him and then saying you knew how I felt. Like he hired her to stab him if Fukuzawa couldn't get the job done. He was like, oh, Fukuzawa can't kill me. You have to stab me, and then give it to Fukuzawa and make him say that it was him. What? That doesn't make sense. Like, you might as well stab yourself. But he could have had the time sword. I stopped writing up there on the board because at this point I'm like, wait, what? And then Atsushi shows up because Atsushi has to show up. He's the main character, as the anime only people know. And then when he's like, I'm a little tired, he's like, rest up. Like, that's the most anime only dialogue ever. I'm a little tired, Fukuzawa. Don't worry, Fukuchi, you just rest up. I'm like, what now? When did this become a 90s BL again? Show! Just losing my mind. And then Fukuchi dies and he cries and sobs. And I like that Techo and Kenji are like, did we miss something? Techo and Kendo are like, Techo just looks like, serves him right, bitch. And Kenji's like, I don't know that man. And then Lucy's there at the airport. Why is she there? She's like, this was some bullshit, wasn't it? And Kyoka's there, and then Rampo shows up. And I did like when Rampo said when the agency was formed, that was the first guest at our celebration. I liked that. That part was a nice, sweet sentiment of, oh, the first guy that shows up is the guy that has to die for the 88 to continue. Maybe. Who knows? And then Fukuzawa. It's like the worst thing. Like, oh, which he looks miserable. They animated Fukuzawa looking so freaking sad that his ex-boyfriend is dead. And so it's just like, oh, Fukuchi's like, I love you, but I'm going to leave you with this incredible burden because I couldn't take it on myself. Like, Asagiri, I hope you save this. I hope you go back and save this or something. I hope something gets retconned and you use the time-traveling sword to do something. I don't know how. And he can't destroy the thing. Which him just being like, arr! God, it can't. You can't destroy it. It's the curse the old man placed on you. Why? We don't need that. And so then 2 hours later, Atsushi is back to fighting something. It's this thing. It looks like Fukuchi with the hair. But it has these weird alien ears and a thing over its head. It looks kind of like an alien. Why is this Jujutsu Kaisen character here? Why? It's got night gear on. It has night gear on and the sword, and looks like it's had a magical girl transformation and antlers. What? Why is this the time sword firing laser beams? What? Why did Octagawa show up looking like a Bleach character with a helmet on? What? And he's like, just the two of us? Why does he have the shoulder pad? Guys, I can't. I'm done. I don't know how much of this could possibly, like Octagawa's coat doesn't even look the same anymore. It looks totally different. It looks like a pea coat. And there's night gear. Why are they wearing night gear? What is happening? I lost it, guys. I'm done. I'm donezo. I'm really excited to see the manga next week and see what all of this is anime only nonsense. My only fear is like, how the fudge are you gonna retcon this? How? Or Asagiri better have some serious. It's in 2 hours. Well, a lot can happen in 2 hours in this series. So I expect there to be some major. When Asagiri writes in the manga, I expect there to be some major developments. But so I'm gonna talk about the manga next week, and then I'll talk about what I'm doing with Bungo Stray Dogs after that. But y'all, I'm sorry I had to rant, but this episode just broke me. It literally broke me. I'm excited to hear your thoughts down below. Please, no manga spoilers, you monsters. I'll have the manga reaction up soon, and then it won't matter because supposedly it's caught up, so it won't matter. But bless its bones. In the meantime, I hope you all had a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and we'll be back very soon with the manga reaction for Bungo Stray Dogs Season 5. Bye.